Welcome back to my series about restoring hand missals with new leather covers. If you've not seen part 1 where I prepare the leather, follow the link to that. We'll dive right into part 2, making the leather cover for this missal, which you can see is held together by duct tape and has some very sorry looking pages on the inside too. But fear not, it will look like this by the end of the video. So to see how I make the leather cover for books like this, stay tuned. Before we get to that, saving the frontispiece is the first order of business. The fact that the publisher's page is missing, and that this frontispiece has been glued to the inside board of the cover, I suspect this was done in the same bodged repair which applied the duct tape to the outside. Fortunately, I was able to lift this delicate sheet from the boards and remount it on a sturdier paper, making sure the tears are stuck down. Paper is more delicate when it's got glue on it, obviously, so I rub it down through greaseproof paper so there's no chance of the friction adding further tears. It's kind of the opposite of what I'm going for. I trim it to size, add a nice marbled paper on top of that, and now the text block is ready for its new leather cover. I clamp the text block in the finishing press and glue on the new spine. The ribs on the spine are called false raised bands. False because they're not part of the text block like they would have been in ye olde medieval bindings, which were sewn onto hemp cords. Even when the materials changed and the cords weren't an integral part of the structure of the book anymore, people still thought that's what books should look like, and so false bands were created. I dampen the leather first and then paste up the spine area using wheat starch paste, which takes longer to dry than the synthetic glues like PVA or EVA, but it does give bookbinders time to work the leather over those bands. Pulling this leather down over the bands is a bit tough because the more era-appropriate calf leather I'm using is decidedly stiffer than the Moroccan, that is goat leather, typically used today. Still, you can really see them take shape when I use these band nippers to bring up the bands, as we say. I must have been channeling my inner Wes Anderson when I set up this shot, and I won't be doing it again. The camera was completely in the way. Tying up the book by winding this string around the nails in the tying up boards that I've made allows the pasted leather to set in its shape around those bands. While I awkwardly work the string around the spine, trying desperately to avoid nudging the camera, if you could please give the like button a nudge if you've enjoyed this so far, that would be great. I suppose that way more people will see me making a complete meal of this procedure, which usually takes me less than a minute when I'm doing it but not trying to film it at the same time. Now I know what you're thinking, but don't worry, those two rather noticeable creases in the leather from the tying up will disappear once it's pasted out and stretched over the boards. I'm using a watered down paste here to further reduce that stiffness in the leather, and then I'll do 2 more layers of regular paste. It's a bit like papering a wall. Like plaster, leather absorbs the paste, so you need to almost saturate it before it'll stick to anything. I've pasted the boards as well for even better adhesion, and I position them carefully up to a line I've marked on the white linen hinge on the text block. You can't really see that here, unfortunately. Doesn't matter, all of that will be hidden once the case is fully on. Oh boy, and here's another Wes Anderson shot. Now it's time for the English paring knife. The straight edge is perfect for paring leather corners at just the right angle. I fold up the corner just to check how much is going to be turned in over the boards. And because these boards are quite thin, I've left a bit too much of a margin, so another quick trim and it's just right. My thanks to the award-winning bookbinder Glenn Malkin for sharing this technique on his YouTube channel. Cutting out this little wedge, this little triangle, makes for a neat mitre on the inside of the boards and only one layer of leather. Too much leather at the corners makes them look blobby, is probably the word, and that's not the look I'm going for. I turn in the leather around the boards and spine. Always long edges first. Sometimes it just needs a little encouragement with the bone folder. Again, because calf is so much stiffer than goat, I have to very patiently work it along the edge of the boards. Now when leather dries, it shrinks and it pulls the boards into the bowed convex shape you can see here, and no one wants wonky boards on their book. But I knew this was going to happen because it nearly always does. So I'd already lined the inside of the boards with plain white paper so that when I squared up the turn-ins, it's easier to peel off that sliver of leather than if it was stuck to the grey board underneath, which does have a habit of pulling up in great big chunks. I square them up so that I can infill that gap with another piece of 100 GSM, I think that's about £80 text weight paper, which will pull the boards back the other way towards straight. There were many paper repairs needed in this missal. There was nothing I could do about the near century's worth of finger grease which have stained these pages, but I could prevent a loose corner from getting worse. I use a couple of layers of tissue, adhered with methyl cellulose, yet another adhesive that bookbinders use, which dries perfectly clear so as not to obscure the text underneath. That corner, which was in real danger of tearing off completely, is now very securely held. I trim off the excess tissue after this, of course. Finally, the marbled end papers are glued out, also adding a corrective pull to the boards. The last thing you want is any air pockets, so I stretch the paper as I close the cover and quickly flip it over and gently work it down even further. The book is given a quick squeeze in a nipping press and left to dry under weights so that the finished result will be squared away. As you can see, this hand missal has been through quite a transformation. Gone is the duct tape from the spine, thanks be to God, and gone is the cloth cover. In their place, sturdy boards that are going to protect the book, and a beautiful black calf leather cover. On the spine, 5 raised bands, and Roman Missal stamped in gold on the spine. The final touch, obviously the decoration of the 5 crosses on the front and the back, in keeping with the original, so I could actually see that was on the original cover. Something like that was done on the original cover. Do take a look at the next video in this playlist, which goes into more detail about what's going on the outside of this book, the tooling of a book as it's called, the decoration that goes on the outside, whether that's blind, as is in the case here, there's no gold, it's just the stamp, or gold decoration as well. We're going to take a look at that in the next video. If you want to see how a book with completely loose pages is dealt with, you can watch the repair I did for my parish's Manual of Prayers by clicking on that video, and I'll see you back in the bindery next time.